The difference is one person's all talk, the other person has delivered. I have receipts, as they would say. We can even move boldly into the future, or we can go backwards 30 years. I would stand up and fight back. And what I would say is Washington, D.C. is the best city in the world. And it's not because of the person who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dream City podcast, supported by Spotlight DC. I'm Cuneyt Dill.
And I'm Tom Sherwood.
We have a very special show today with mayoral candidate Kenyan McDuffie. We're talking about affordability, how he would handle President Trump, and the future of Washington. But first, let me tell you about Spotlight DC, our sponsor. The Capital City Fund for Investigative Journalism supports accountability reporting in DC. You can also support local journalism by donating at spotlightdc.org. Mr. McDuffie, Councilman, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing fantastic. How are you all doing?
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
You know, I'm going to call you council member because the title is earned and forever, right? That's how that goes. We have a lot of topics to talk about. It's a pivotal year for DC, of course. Federal interference in Washington is creating a situation like none other, and it's the first open mayor seat in 20 years. But on the Dream City pod, we want to get to know you first, too. So why don't we talk about Stronghold? I want to get to know how you grew up in D.C., your D.C. story. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. I'm actually sitting in the home where me and Princess, Casey, and Josie live. And it's right here in Stronghold. It's a home that my grandparents bought way back in 1952. And so I'm the third generation to live in this home. Princess and I bought it from my mom almost 20 years ago now. And we're raising our two daughters here, one of whom is in her first year at college. But it's when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was a working class, blue collar neighborhood of people who all knew each other and who had largely grown up with each other. And so you're talking about generations of families that had grown up in Stronghold and who had largely come here to pursue opportunity in the federal government. A lot of people came from the South. My great-grandparents came from the South, and my grandparents were raised here, and now we're living here in Washington, D.C., right here in Stronghold, making sure that we are fighting and delivering for all D.C. But the neighborhood largely was working class, but it sort of hit that time in the 80s and 90s when we were the crack epidemic, and when we were the murder capital of the United States. And so a lot of cities across the country experienced that. DC was no exception. I know Tom remembers those days, and that sort of was the context in which I grew up. So it went from that, neighborhood that everybody was thriving, or at least it looked like it. People were working in government jobs, and to being one that was plagued by, addiction, poverty, and violence. And,
Councilmember,
yep.
Tell us where Stronghold is and how you got the name. It's up on near the McMillan Reservoir and Michigan Avenue in that area.
Yeah, so it is bounded by...
But that's not like, is it an official name? I know there's a community group, and we know what Chevy Chase is, we know what Capitol Hill is, we know what Anacostia is, but a lot of people don't know where it is. Yeah. And that your father and his friends started it because they thought they were strong men playing athletics. Tell us a little bit about the name itself.
I heard a little bit about this.
Yeah, so the name Stronghold was founded by a bunch of young folks who went to see a movie on Rhode Island Avenue near First Street when there used to be a theater there. And it was a movie where they heard, I think some Native Americans used the phrase stronghold, and it was like they were going back to their stronghold. And so those young men largely decided that they were going to go home and call their neighborhood Stronghold. It is technically a part of Edgewood, but it's bounded by North Capitol Street, Michigan Avenue to the north, and Bryan Street to the south. And it's got Glenwood and Prospect Hill cemeteries that are adjacent to the Stronghold. And so, again, my grandparents bought this house in 1952, and my dad and his brothers and sister grew up here. And then me and my brothers and my sister grew up here. And now Princess and I are raising Casey and Josie here. And it's not the same Stronghold it was in the 50s and 60s. And just like when we were growing up, it wasn't the same Stronghold full of baby boomers, but it is largely still has that strong sense of community that's here, though.
I listened to you talk on a podcast about basketball and sort of the private schools and the public schools and the sort of recruitment that would go on. There's a lot of joy in that too. And I think you also spoke to a lot of the challenges in the neighborhood too, and trying to find your footing as a young adult in DC. There are still so many challenges for young people in DC, in many parts of this city. I remember growing up in DC, going to high school, and I knew kids who came from parts of town where they didn't have $1 to take the metro. Like, they would ask, their teachers and stuff. And those challenges still exist. It's just crazy to me that, like, so many decades have passed, and it can feel intractable at times. What do you?
So when I was growing up, I grew up in a 2-parent household. My mom worked at the federal government, Library of Congress, as a library tech, and my dad was an electrician. He graduated from Bell Vocational School, right? Did 2 years in the service, came back, always had a job, worked at DPW as an electrician, where he retired. And there are lots of families like that in Stronghold. And when the crack epidemic hit, it was virtually impossible to escape it. I tell people all the time, and folks who grew up here, at least in parts of the city that experienced it, know what I'm talking about. You could have grown up like I did, and my siblings did, in a 2-parent household who loved you, cared about you, but you walked outside the door to the sounds of gunshots, right? You had nights where there were bloodstained streets, yellow tape. That was the backdrop for a lot of my upbringing, unfortunately. And so the days that I remember, there are lots of happy days, lots of days where we had civic association meetings and community days, and we still celebrate, annually in Stronghold. But, for me, it was playing ball in the Metropolitan Police Boys and Girls Club. So this adversarial relationship between police and the community wasn't something that I can associate with my earliest memories. It was walking inside the number 10 Boys and Girls Club at 14th and Clifton. Despite all the challenges happening outside, it was a safe haven inside that building. I walked in, I was greeted by Officer Lynch. I went downstairs to play basketball, and Ed Hill, LeBarry, Williams, Mitch Creedle, who was back then in the 80s, was just getting on the force of Metropolitan Police Department. He retired as a detective, Mitch Creedle. But he was our coach, right? And so we were fostering those relationships. And 3 doors down from here, where my best friends lived, their older brother was a police officer with the Metropolitan Police Department. So we celebrated our first responders. They were people who were of the community, and they weren't just responding to a 911 call. And so they had gone to schools here and things like that. And it really gave Stronghold a strong sense of community, where we prioritized faith, family, and community growing up here.
You went to Howard. You told in a Howard interview, you said that when you were 3 years old, your godfather was shot and killed by the DC Police Department. Yeah. Can you tell us just a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually 13 years old.
Oh, 13. That must have been a misprint.
Yeah, it was 13. Because I remember it like it was yesterday. It was actually the first time I saw my dad cry. Right. I grew up, my dad was like, just sort of the epitome of a strong man and somebody who provided for the family. And, my goddad was, enjoying his time at a club. The way that I understand it, he got into a altercation with a person inside the club. My godfather won that altercation, and as he walked outside of the club, he was confronted by that person who happened to be an off-duty Metropolitan Police Department officer, and he shot my godfather dead on the sidewalk outside of a club on 12th Street in Northeast Washington, D.C. And it wasn't far from my grade school at St. Anthony. And so not only did he lose his life, but, every time I'd go to school or go to, retail on 12th Street, we had memories of that trauma and losing my godfather. And it was the first time I saw my dad cry because it was somebody who he grew up with in this neighborhood, right? They still have their family home in the neighborhood right up the street, right? And some of my closest friends are that family, and they experienced that at a very early age. So having to grow up without a dad and have a dad who was killed to gun violence, it was trauma that I didn't recognize as trauma at a very early age, unfortunately. But, there was a lot more of that to come. Little did I know in my life, growing up in Stronghold, literally losing friends in this neighborhood to gun violence a couple of whom, I watched what happened. And one of them, I actually held him as he bled out in my arms in my neighborhood. Right. And that's it's something that
Was that Dion or was that?
Well, Dion was the first to get killed that inspired me to leave the Postal Service. So that was 1998.
Oh, okay. That's later.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was at the Postal Service at that point. And before I was at the Postal Service, I was hanging out because I couldn't get a job when I graduated from Jackson Reed. Right. I tell people about the opportunity and the need for us to really grow our economy, not just because I read it in a book or in school or in college, just because I lived it. When I graduated from high school, one of the best open admissions public schools in this city, Jackson Reed, formerly Woodrow Wilson, I couldn't get a job. And that's all I wanted was to get a good government job like the successful people who I had seen in my community. But the economy was different then and there weren't jobs to be had. And I struggled for a while right here in this community, making a bunch of poor decisions that could have easily landed me in prison or dead, like some of my friends. And that job, that opportunity to carry mail for the United States Postal Service literally saved my life
How
and
did you
put me
get
in.
that job? How did you get the? You tell a lot of people your postal store carrying mail. Did you just walk in and apply? Did you know
I
someone who
wish.
worked there?
I wish. No, I didn't. In actuality, I went along with my cousin and some of my friends from the neighborhood to the armory over in by the metro, and we took the civil service test. And we hoped, crossed our fingers, prayed that we would get a call back from a government job. Right? We filled out applications both for the federal government and the DC government, but we got no callbacks. Me and a dear friend of mine, my best friend, we even took it a step farther and took the metro around to the different stops that had malls within walking distance. You all remember like the old White Flint Mall,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah, of course.
Yep, Pentagon City. And we applied to the stores that said they were hiring, and yet we didn't get a call back. And so, we did what a lot of young black men at that time did to take care of themselves. And it wasn't until a year and a half later, in
You were like
October.
18, 19 then?
That was 19. It was October, shortly after my 19th birthday, October of 1994, when I started working at the Postal Service. And I'll never forget it. And I had planned to retire from there. That was the job that everybody wanted. Not only was I the envy of my friends, I was the envy of some of my friends' parents who weren't working at that time, right? I went from making $0 to making $12.36 with all the overtime I could handle because I was one of the lower people on the totem pole, right? So they didn't want to pay the overtime or the double time to the more experienced carriers. So I carried out a friendship station and I was working from the beginning of the day all the way to the end. And we were making really good money. I was making an honest living. I had, union benefits. I know the value of a good paying job. Not only was I taking care of myself, but I was also helping out where I could around the house, and helping friends out, frankly, for that matter, who didn't have jobs. And so it literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. And it allowed me to work there. I dropped out of UDC a couple times earlier because my mom wanted me to go and I wasn't serious about it. But when I went to the Postal Service, I had that job. And every day I went there proudly and I worked hard and I saved up money. And to the time where Dion got shot and killed in 1998. So 4 years later. And then shortly after that, Marvin, a good friend of mine, got shot. And it was only yards away at two separate instances in a span of less than 2 months. They died. And those deaths hit me in a way that no deaths had hit me before. Right? Those are my friends. They grew up in this neighborhood. They wanted what I wanted. Their families wanted what my family wanted. And yet their lives were snuffed out away from them due to gun violence in 1998. And I remember, finding a little room in the basement of my home and crying to myself, wondering when it was going to stop, when it was going to end. And, thinking like, somebody's got to do something about this. And so I left the Postal Service in 1998, guys. And that wasn't an easy decision because there were a lot of people in my neighborhood who told me it'd be stupid for me to leave the Postal Service, right? To try college for the third time after I had tried twice before and failed. And there were very few people who loved me as friends who said, you should do that. You should take that risk. But my mom supported me, my siblings supported me, and my then girlfriend, my now wife, was already in college at South Carolina State University, and my dear friend who grew up right there across the alley. I'm looking at his house. Roger Fairfax, who's the dean of Howard University Law School, he always stayed on my case when he came home from college and law school to do something different. And I finally relented and built up the courage to resign from the Postal Service in August of 1998 to go back to UDC for the third time. And this time was different. I was motivated by the tragic deaths of my friends, and I wanted to change my life, and I wanted to change my community for that matter. And I went back, did well, stayed there for a year at UDC, transferred over to Howard University, and the rest is, as they say, is history.
And then law school at the University of Maryland.
Well, after Howard University, I actually worked at on the for Eleanor Holmes Norton. So I worked for our Warrior on the Hill. I started out in her constituent services office, where I met dear friends of mine who I'm still friends with today. People like Sheila Bunn, Aaron Ward, like Bonnie Johnson, like Tom. I met so many wonderful people, and Elijah Naisuma. And then I went up to the Hill after a few months because my original desire was to work on the Hill, but they didn't have any jobs at the time. And then one opened up, and Julia Hudson was the chief of staff at the time. Donald Brazil was a fixture in the office, and I learned how to fight for DC without a vote.
Well, when did you work for Prince George's County in the state's attorney's office? Because the person you worked for then was Glenn Ivey,
That's right,
who is the congressman now.
I left
2007, I think.
I left Eleanor Holmes Norton's office in the fall of 2003 to go to law school at the University of Maryland Law School. And I loved, the practical aspect of law school. My dear friend and mentor was then professor and actually Montgomery County Council member Tom Perez. I ended up being his research assistant in law school. I wrote on to the Civil Rights Law Journal at Maryland, and my first job out of law school was clerking for a judge on the Prince George's County Circuit Court, and then I went upstairs to work for then state's attorney, current Congressman Glenn Ivey, before going to the Department of Justice and working in the Civil Rights Division under President Obama, and then Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Tom Perez. So I met a bunch of really smart, hardworking public servants at a time when they were actually doing civil rights work. I was traveling the country investigating jails, prisons, juvenile justice facilities, mental health facilities, nursing homes, making sure the conditions were constitutional. I was traveling to places that I would have never seen otherwise. Silver City, New Mexico, Paducah, Kentucky, places in California to investigate police departments, right? I worked on a case and opened a case, in fact, in East Haven, Connecticut, where there were allegations of a pattern or practice of police misconduct, where they were aggressively racially profiling and using excessive force in the Latino community, right? So when I say today, I'm going to fight to protect our most vulnerable neighbors, our Latino neighbors, our community that's being threatened and torn away from their families by this administration, I'm not just saying that. It's not just rhetoric for me. I'm a civil rights lawyer at heart, and I've done that kind of work. I know how to protect people's civil rights and civil liberties, and I did it at the council as well, too, right? So it's not just about rhetoric and trying to win an election. I do this work because it's my passion and it's my purpose, and I developed those values in this house, right, and on the streets and alleys of Stronghold.
You've hit an important point. So we want to talk about ICE and the home rule at stake when it comes to challenging the Trump administration. You got to the council in 2012, and you were a Ward 5 member. You were an at-large member later on before you most recently left the Wilson building to run for this mayoral seat. I want to talk about and get right into the top issues. Affordability is the big word everyone's using from New York to DC to across the country. You released an 8-page platform about affordability. And one thing that struck me was you told the Washington Post you want to make DC, quote, the most affordable city in the United States. Now, real talk, how do you make DC the most affordable city in the United States?
Yeah.
With a terrible budget problem, with horrible budget,
right?
Reading everywhere.
Yeah, we've got a terrible budget problem. We've got a $1.1 billion spending pressure, and it's a really serious thing. And we're at, I think, an inflection point in Washington, D.C., where we can even move boldly into the future by focusing on affordability, opportunity, and accountable government. Or we can go backwards 30 years to the days where a high school student who grew up in Stronghold couldn't get a job after high school, right? You make it affordable by prioritizing using the people's resources for the people's priorities. You lower the cost of housing through increased supply and anti-displacement protections, right?
How do you do that?
Well, you do it by stabilizing existing housing that is in the District of Columbia, protecting existing affordable housing, but also looking at a market where you even have nonprofit housing providers who need resources, so they're not selling assets right now. You got some of the larger nonprofit housing providers, I won't name names, but they're literally selling assets right now because they're carrying too many costs, right? It takes too long to build, and they have a huge non-payment of rent that's going on right here in the District of Columbia. And so you put resources in place, to reduce the barriers to build in the District of Columbia. You utilize zoning tools, working with the council and working with the zoning commission and working with the community to make it easier to build in parts of the city where we have tremendous opportunity along transit hubs, major thoroughfares, where there are infill development opportunities, but you have to reduce both the regulatory red tape that slows the process down and it makes it more expensive, but you also have to remove the barriers beyond that make it cost almost $1 million to build a single unit of affordable housing in Washington, D.C.
I don't want to interrupt you, but the mayor
Yes,
would
you
say,
do.
well, I don't mean to, but the mayor would say she has a, build, baby, build kind of, philosophy, build more. That's what the Mayor Muriel Bowser has done a lot. She's invested hundreds of millions of dollars in what's called the Housing Production Trust Fund. What would you do differently from the mayor? Because it seems
Yeah.
like she follows the same sort of path, but you're saying
Well,
DC could do better.
I'm saying DC can do better, but I'm also saying that I have a track record of delivering results and supporting the protection of affordable housing, existing affordable housing, and building new affordable housing. I actually have a record. It was my bill that requires anytime the District of Columbia has a surplus, that 50% of that surplus goes directly to the Housing Production Trust Fund, generating hundreds of millions of dollars over the years for the preservation of existing affordable housing and construction of new units of affordable housing. It was also my bill that says whenever you dispose of DC government land for the purpose of building multifamily housing of 10 units or more, you have to, by law, set aside at a floor 20%. If it's near mass transit, it goes up to 30%, and that's across incomes, including deeply affordable housing of 30 to 50% MFI. So I want to put that on the record because some people don't have a track record that they can speak to of actually delivering results. And the way you do it differently is that you address those agencies that work to pave the way for us to be able to build more units of housing across the continuum of housing by addressing the red tape and the issues at the housing agencies, including DHCD, Department of Housing and Community
How would
Development, DCHA, including DOB and other agencies that slow down the process of getting permits to do construction that allow providers, nonprofit, for-profit, and others to build in Washington, D.C. It takes too long to get a permit to build a renovation on your home in
It does
Washington,
take a
D.C.
long time.
Okay.
And
Well,
we're gonna
I wanna-
address that
oh,
using technology,
okay.
making sure that we're not displacing workers, but we're freeing up workers to do what they need to do to speed up that process, and we're using technology to make things more and processes more efficient.
You
Tom,
made
go
a
ahead. I
vague
do have a
reference
follow-up
to
too.
you made a vague reference to Janice Lewis George, your opponent, that she doesn't have the ability or the experience to do it. Was that what you were saying?
Well, I'm going to say
This is a
this.
campaign.
It is
I don't
absolutely
think he was talking
campaign.
about the mayor. That's right. I don't think he was talking about Mayor Bowser.
I was not. What I'm saying is,
You're talking about Janice Lewis George,
I'm
your
talking
principal
about
opponent.
my principal opponent, Janice Lewis George. She came on your show and said that I didn't have a record of doing this or that. And then she referenced bills that other people on the council introduced. She hitched her wagon to people on the council for the last 5 years and doesn't have a record to stand on, which is why she and her people in her campaign are starting to go really negative on the campaign trail because they are all about rhetoric and empty promises. All right. We've got a candidate trying to say she wants to run DC using a New York City playbook. And what I found out by knocking on thousands of doors across the District of Columbia, our voters are really smart and they're not falling for it.
I
Okay.
do want to get right back to the less of the rhetoric for a second, back to the housing part. So your platform says, quote, you will deliver a responsible use of taxpayer dollars dedicated to affordable housing. Can you explain what that means? And you've been on the council, you have a record. What have you done as a council member to make sure DC is spending its affordable housing responsibly? Because a big problem, as you alluded to, is the funds don't go to the most the lowest income bracket that needs affordable housing. The most needy affordable housing units are not being built. That money is not being spent. The city has been called out on it. It hasn't changed. It hasn't followed what the auditor and other audits have said.
Yeah.
What have you done as council member to make sure DC has been responsible?
Absolutely.
And we don't repair the housing that we have is in disrepair, and we don't build the housing that Janae just referenced, new house.
First of all, it's not an either or, right? We have to do both. We have to preserve the existing affordable housing that we have and the resources to be able to do that. And we have to redouble our efforts to build more. It's not that we're not building any affordable housing in the District of Columbia. In fact, we are, right? And to the mayor's credit, she has built significant units of affordable housing over her tenure. It's that we have to do a lot more because we're not building enough of it, particularly in those high need areas of the city, so that whether you own the company or you work at the front desk, you can live in the District of Columbia, work in the District of Columbia, raise a family in the District of Columbia, and find the safe, quality, affordable housing that you need to call DC home. And again, the way you do that is by making these agencies more efficient. But the accountability plank in my platform, it's affordability, opportunity, and accountability. Part of that accountability is holding the government itself accountable. The buck stops with the mayor.
But
right?
Councilmember,
and the leaders that we appoint need to be qualified to be able to run these agencies
you're
in a
talking
way
about if
that's
you
efficient.
become mayor, what you would do, but you would be mayor. The council would have to hold you accountable. As a council member, how have you held the Bowser administration accountable?
Absolutely.
Because
well, I'll tell you one thing. We need more family size units.
That's
right.
But what have you done to push for that?
I've actually funded a study in the budget that required the use of resources to look at the need for family size units, because what I found is that we were building affordable units, but they were largely, these single and units that were small and not family size. The report came back and told us what we already know, right? That we need more family size units in the District of Columbia. And as a result of me doing that and the work of the coalition to do the report, this administration now prioritizes in their RFPs responses that prioritize the construction of larger family size units. That's directly something that I did specifically to address the challenges that we see in the District of Columbia, particularly for our most vulnerable residents and our hardworking families, right? I heard the call, I heard the cry, and I actually legislated in a way that was effective to make sure that we are prioritizing their needs as well, and not just the needs of wealthy people in the District of Columbia.
That's part of the affordability that Cuneyt was asking you about. You, on your campaign sites on social media, said that you wanted to freeze property taxes, forgive predatory parking tickets, and fund baby bonds. This week, though, very quickly after you posted that, you took away freeze property taxes and you took away forgive predatory parking tickets and just kept baby bonds, which is funding families with children and for their future. But why is it that didn't look to me like in this document, I've seen all three of these. Why did you propose freezing property taxes in one moment and then an hour or so later take it away?
Yeah,
Same thing with parking tickets that are overdue.
As is the case with campaigns, sometimes people get overzealous on the team, and that's an instance where a tweet went out on a social media platform saying something that we weren't prepared to say publicly just yet. But what that tweet did was disclose what we're talking about internally to address the challenges that are affecting hardworking families across the District of Columbia. The challenges that they're seeing with rising costs are real, they're palpable, and there's people who are struggling to make ends meet.
Or a mistake?
It was a mistake by a member of my campaign team who posted something that they shouldn't have. It was not approved.
Good. Let me ask about that, because I was surprised just because it comes right out of that, if I can just bring that up.
Sure.
You just picked a campaign manager a week ago, 10 days ago, Shelley Jackson, and your new press person is Derek Robinson. I searched the internet. Neither one of them seemed to have any DC connection. I'm just wondering if these new staffers had anything to do with you putting out a social media post that shouldn't have gone out.
Well, I'm not going to name staffers. Ultimately, it's my campaign. My names are on all the signs on the website, so I own that, right? That's what you're going to get with my administration as mayor too. The accountability stops with me. And
right,
so
but
I
Shelley
will own.
Jackson has I looked at Shelley Jackson's career in working in California and other places on big issues, but I couldn't find anything where she touched down in a local Stronghold or any other community in the district.
They have connections, including Derek Robinson, who lived here for a period too. And my team throughout is comprised both of people who are new to DC and people who have been DC natives to DC.
Why so late in picking it? You were planning to run for mayor last fall if things worked out, and it did, and you are. Why did you take so long to get a campaign manager in place just 3 months before the election?
Well, the way that we run our campaign is that it's people powered. And ultimately, we've been in this race since January 14th. We had a launch manager in place who did a really effective job of getting our campaign off the ground. The energy's been amazing. The momentum's been fantastic. It's only really been you all who've been asking about campaign managers and stuff. All the doors we knocked on, the thousands of doors across all 8 wards, from Ward 1 to Ward 8, not a single person asked me, hey, who's your campaign manager? They're asking about how are we going to deal with those household issues, but the cost of groceries, utility bills. They're asking about, how we're going to provide for working families who just need a job. These young folks are coming back to this city and they're not seeing opportunity. They want to know how we're going to fight back against a hostile federal administration who are snatching up our, Latino neighbors off the street away from their families. And I'm saying I've got the track record of actually doing that. They want to talk about nationally, even they're talking about issues around ICE and they should be wearing body cameras. Well, I'm telling them that I actually authored the District of Columbia's police on body camera legislation, right? And so you got somebody who's using a lot of rhetoric.
We're going to get to President Trump.
Okay.
We're going to get to Trump, but I think we want
we got to move on in a second too, Tom.
But just for the record, not a single door that I've knocked on has anybody asked me about a campaign manager.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Exactly.
No, but I don't want to play gotcha or throw anyone under the bus. But do you support freezing property taxes or giving some relief for what you call predatory parking? Predatory parking.
Listen. The parking tickets and the speeding camera tickets, in some instances, people have told me feel predatory.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've said in response is, as mayor, if it's not about safety, the cameras are going to come down. We're going to prioritize safety.
You would want to bring them.
We are a multimodal, world-class capital. We want people to walk, run, bike, drive, and more importantly, catch public transportation to everywhere they need to go in Washington, D.C. for leisure and for work and everything in between. We want tourists to avail themselves of those things. Yeah. What we don't want is to prey on residents across this city or even visitors to this city. And largely, these cameras have demonstrated an outsized impact on some of our most low-income families, right?
Isn't there a camera on 16th Street right near your house?
I don't live on 16th Street. You must be confusing me with another person. I live on North Capitol Street.
Stronghold is right in front of the
Isn't there one right down the street from you on North Capitol Street?
There's several of them.
There's several of them. They're everywhere.
There's all those Marylanders you should just collect the money from Marylanders and Virginians, and we'd be rich.
Tom, Jeanette, I'm happy to collect the money from whomever violates the law. When a camera is prioritizing safety, we want safe streets across the District of Columbia in all 8 wards, and we're going to prioritize safety when it comes to camera deployment. What we're not going to do is prey on residents and hardworking families in the District of Columbia, particularly where a lot of these cameras in places that affect the folks on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder in Washington, D.C. It's not fair and it's not just. And as mayor, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, and we really do need to move on in a second. But the reason I'm asking is they bring in a lot of money for the budget. The mayor really supports it. There are Republicans in Congress who want to get rid of it. And every time it's come up, the mayor says, this brings a lot of money. You're going to mess up our budget if you do that. But what about freezing property taxes?
The question is, are the cameras about money and revenue, or are they about safety?
That's right.
And where the camera is about safety, it will remain. And where there are absence of cameras in places that are unsafe, there will be new cameras. What they won't be are cameras to generate revenue on the backs of hardworking people in the District of Columbia.
But what I want to ask you
do not accept that.
You want to create the new baby bonds program, which has been one of your big legislative pushes. The mayor has not funded baby bonds. It would help. You can explain it better than I can, but it would be a new program in essence. Do you want to freeze property taxes as well as spend on a new program like that, in addition to cutting revenue you would get from traffic cameras? What I'm wondering is, how do you assume that
revenue gets cut when I say that I'm not going to prey on hardworking people using traffic cameras. What I'm saying is we're going to prioritize safety. So there will be cameras.
Property taxes,
let me tell you about what people want to hear when I knock on doors. They want to know that they have a mayor who's prioritizing their safety when it comes to those cameras, not generating revenue on the backs of poor people.
I hear you. I hear you. And
now,
I hear a
when
lot
it comes to baby bonds, we want to make sure that there is real opportunity in communities for people who have felt marginalized in this city for far too long. We've built buildings all up and down this city, downtown and other places, and they've not seen themselves reflected in the prosperity. So when it comes to doing life-changing work, generational legislation, baby bonds is one of those things that we can point to, right? We did it. I authored the bill. We were one of the first in the country to pass the law, and we were the first jurisdiction in the country to fund it. You're right. The mayor hasn't supported it, but the council has. And I've led the way on that.
People don't know necessarily.
Sure.
The baby bonds would be a system where for every child born in the district, something like $1,000 a year would be put into an account where they would not have access to it until they're 18.
That's
Roughly,
right.
that's the way it would work. You can fund this by what?
It would create trust funds for babies born into poverty in the District of Columbia. We're talking about breaking the cycle of generational poverty in Washington, D.C.
It'll be income tested.
Where we have, it would be people who are Medicaid eligible, but we have the largest racial wealth gap of any city in the United States, and it's been me championing making this city more racially equitable, more socially just, and more economically inclusive. And baby bonds is one of the ways that you do that by giving people hope and giving them opportunities so that when they turn 18 years old, they have a chance at life in Washington, D.C. Just a fair chance. It's not going to make them rich. We're giving them a chance.
You're right. Even Trump has talked about baby bonds for people. But how would you afford your program given the difficult budget system we're in? How much would it cost maybe in the first year? Is there financial analysis for what it would be for the first year?
The last financial impact we had, it was somewhere in the range of $65 million.
A year.
Yes. But it costs over the course of the financial plan, 4-year financial plan.
4 years. Well, that's a small part of $21 billion.
So you just took the words out of my mouth, Tom Sherwood, right? When you have a budget of $21 billion, baby bonds is a small price to pay in order to chip away at the racial wealth gap and give kids born into cycles of poverty in Washington, D.C. a fighting chance. That's all we're trying to do with baby bonds. And it's one of the most demonstrated ways through research that you can give people an opportunity to invest in themselves, right? To maybe take up a trade or to go to college or to put some money down on a house or to start a business in Washington, D.C., right? We're not trying to make people rich. We're trying to give them a fighting chance. And that's exactly what baby bonds does. And even though the mayor didn't fund it, I worked with the council to make sure it was funded since day one when we did it in 2021 for the fiscal year 2022. October 1, 2022 is when it started. And then 2 years from that, the mayor defunded it, and I identified, working with the chairman and others, money to put it back in the budget. And I did that for 3 successive years to fund it because I believe deeply in the power of opportunity and hope and using resources to have a return on the investment by giving people a shot at staying in Washington, D.C. and not being pushed out like more than 20,000 Black people have over the last couple of decades.
Another one of your, well, actually, can I go back?
Go back to the
Where are,
Oh, you want to talk about guaranteed basic income pilot that I did? The first one in DC's history that sent direct cash assistance to pregnant and expecting moms in wards 5, 7, and 8.
I think thinking about the NEAR Act.
I don't want to challenge you on the merits of any of this. I think people
okay.
can go back and forth. But in terms of freezing property taxes, when you say things like that,
maybe challenge opponents, people who come on here and say they want to be mayor and they want to do all these things that cost hundreds of millions of dollars that are model off of New York City.
Yes.
And just tell them to go visit New York City and see what the mayor's doing there. He's turning to the state to try to find money to do his rental policies. And guess what? We don't have a state. There's no Albany right here.
We don't have a state.
It's one DC.
Can I get an answer on the freeze property taxes? Are you considering that? Are you yes or no?
Jeanette, you know what's interesting? I told you that was a mistake made by a member of my staff, and yet you spent the last 5 minutes trying to get an answer on something.
No,
let's focus on what people that are not doors are knock on.
Well, hold on. You said we're still considering it. You're still considering it. That's it, right?
Yeah, no. So that's on the table as things that we look at because
that's all I'm asking.
We've heard. Oh, okay, all right. I don't want to. So let me say this: we've knocked on thousands of doors in it, and some people have talked about seeing their property assessments increase.
That's true.
And you know the questions that they're asking? What are we getting in return?
Yeah, but property assessments are going down according to the CFO's office. I will tell you in Southwest, I'm aware of people whose property assessments have dropped considerably over the last 2 years. And in commercial property taxes, I'm sure freezing commercial taxes, these buildings, as you know, are being bankrupt because they don't have the income to pay the taxes they're paying now. But so I don't know how this is all going to work.
Well, Tom's saying the federal government's doing basically, all the jobs they cut downtown has had the impact of reducing some of the.
It is the jobs that they cut downtown. It is the reductions in federal spending. It is the tariff policy that's making it more difficult to run a small business. All those things are contributing to the negative impact on DC's local economy, which is why we need a mayor who understands that and understands looking at a responsible policy that helps to grow our economy, focusing on industries that create jobs in the District of Columbia, even industries that have been part of our resurgence over the years, hospitality, tourism,
that's right,
nightlife,
but
creative
at this
economy.
moment, commercial property taxes, every building is reassessed every year. They're paying X dollars now, and because of the bad economy, they will be reassessed at lower values. It's not a matter of freezing it where they are. It's doing something to keep them from becoming even less profitable.
It's doing something from allowing the assessments to be provided that are much higher than the actual value of the properties, right? People are selling properties for a certain value, and yet they look at their assessments and see something that's a lot more. It is reconciling reality with the assessments process. And,
I've always said that if somebody will sell me their house at their assessed value, I will buy it.
Well, in this market, you might be able to get that because people are selling homes.
I've said it for 20 years.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is this the way that can make DC more affordable? I mean, the economy is kind of, it's not doing so good. And
no, it's not. But there are areas where we can try to retain the talent from those displaced federal workers, looking at industries where there's potential for growth. I mean, technology is one of those areas, looking at the use of, technology around cyber, AI, life sciences, looking at GovTech and the areas where our proximity to the federal government actually is a competitive advantage. Is something that we need to lean into, innovation, both in use of making government processes more efficient, but also where we can incent the types of businesses that we want to locate here, grow here, and hire more workers that are already here with immense amounts of talent. We are one of the most talent-rich jurisdictions of any in the country, and we need to leverage that, right? We have solid fundamentals as the nation's capital. We have a horrible branding problem with a president who doesn't care about local DC and is treating us like a political football. I've got experience to fight back against that and a vision for the city that's going to be a lot more inclusive and it's going to be more opportunity rich.
One of the big things, when you think about appealing place to live and work is public safety. So one of your legislative milestones was the NEAR Act. At the time in 2016, I believe it was the public health approach to crime that you authored. The mayor never really fully funded it. I don't think she ever fully funded it. Did she ever fully fund? Did it ever get around?
Not fully. Never really fully embraced it.
What were the successes of that program? What were the parts where it didn't go so well?
Right. Well, I think I'm not going to talk about it in the past tense because it still exists.
That's true.
And it is something that ushered in a public health-based approach to crime prevention and intervention, modeled after the Cure Violence model that came out of California. It also had an aspect of the Office of Neighborhood Safety out of Richmond, California. I looked at the ROCA model in Boston, and I looked at Ceasefire in Baltimore. I looked at things around the country that were evidence-based and data-driven, that if fully implemented with the fidelity necessary when it comes to doing things that are new, that it would be successful. And we have seen successes where it's been implemented with fidelity and resourced where the needs are on the ground. What we haven't seen is the type of communication coordination across the Office of the Attorney General and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. It was never intended by the NEAR Act for there to be two almost competing approaches to this work. It was going to be one unified, largely independent effort that ushered in a new approach. You treat crime and violence like the epidemic that it is in certain communities, much like we did COVID, right? When COVID hit, you saw people respond with a great sense of urgency, identify vaccines and identify communities, and then push those vaccines out to those communities to stop the spread. You approach violence in the same way because it's not violence happening across the District of Columbia, right? It is people from certain communities that have largely been plagued by historic levels of violence and a lack of opportunity who are responsible for some of the violence that we've seen, both young folks and adults. And the NEAR Act ushered in a public health-based approach to crime prevention and intervention. And there were several titles to the NEAR Act, including the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the creation of the Office of Violence Prevention and Health Equity that the mayor never implemented, right? It was the police data and transparency provisions that the ACLU had to sue in order for MPD to implement. I supported that lawsuit, and I support transparency around data for policing, right?
What would you say, though, for someone looking at the stats, and that passed in 2016, implemented in 2017, partially, crime went to the highest it's been in like 20, 25 years and the years after that. I mean, it was a national problem, the pandemic and cities nationwide. But man, you think about it and you wonder,
Has
what happened
has the
there?
NEAR Act stemmed the increase in crime in the city? The stats would say overall, no.
Well,
because it hasn't been fully implemented.
Stats actually say that crime is down in Washington, D.C.
Now it's down,
and we think
it went up wildly high.
Yep, and now it's down because when you start to have the auditor hold the mayor accountable for implementing with more zeal the NEAR Act, putting mental health workers to respond to crises where there's an indicia of mental concerns and challenges. When you start to make sure you embed
are they doing
workers? That? Yes. When you start to embed, the right types of workers inside of hospital emergency rooms to respond to the trauma that individuals' families face when they respond, when they arrive with gun violence, that stuff starts to work. And when you actually have people who are credible and well-trained community violence interrupters show up in a neighborhood to relate to the people who are most likely to cause gun violence or be the victim of gun violence, identify them, put them in a classroom setting in a pathways program, train them up with the skills that they need, give them employment, then you get people off the street using opportunity and levers. And at the same time, by the way, you're holding criminals accountable. So the NEAR Act wasn't just public safety in a vacuum. Again, there were multiple provisions of the NEAR Act that emphasized two things primarily: accountability and opportunity. You hold violent criminals accountable to the fullest extent of the law. You do it swiftly, you do it certainly, but then you usher in opportunity into those communities where people have been marginalized, when they've been over-policed, where police only show up after somebody calls 911. Right. That's not what community policing looks like. I'm telling you as an expert who traveled the country offering technical assistance, and I'm telling you as by somebody who's been arrested in their own neighborhood as a teenager right outside this door at a time when they were focusing on policing in a way that was not community policing. They were snatching young people off the corners. I had the National Guard in my neighborhoods shining spotlights in Stronghold in the 80s and 90s, right? And I know what injustice feels like. The NEAR Act was an evidence-based, data-driven response amid other things that we did when I chaired the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, including the body-worn camera legislation, including doing criminal justice reform in the District of Columbia, including doing discrimination policy, anti-discrimination policy in employment with the ban the box for employment. I put the amendment in it. I gave it teeth. I did ban a box for housing so that people wouldn't discriminate. Housing providers could discriminate against returning citizens. And I did a fair credit bill that said that employers can't discriminate on somebody based on their credit history, right?
All right,
That's my record.
Before we move on, I got to read. Spotlight DC funds high-impact accountability journalism. You can support Spotlight DC and local journalism by donating at spotlightdc.org. Tom, I think you want to ask about policing.
Yes, I want to. Every time we have this conversation on the politics hour with any political person, they always say, well, we've got these long-term issues we have to do with fixing the reasons people commit crimes. Long violence interruption, extra schooling, after school, before school, during school, all of that. I'm all in favor of everything to do to address the mental health and the jobs, violence interruption, writ big. Now, the other issue side of it, as you said, hold people accountable, have people arrested and charged and accountable for the crimes they commit. In the District of Columbia, Charles Ramsey, when he was here back in the 90s, they did some kind of study and said, we need 4,000 police officers. We are now down over to 3,100, a little more than 3,100. I asked you on the politics hour a couple of months ago, I think, where are we in terms of getting police in the neighborhoods? They're so busy helping the federal government, and they're so short of time. There are very few people actually on duty in the cities. Police staffing, their overtime is outrageous.
It's out of control.
Out the cops, and
it's out of control.
Financially crazy. Let me ask you the number question. Not 4,000 necessarily, not 3,100 we have now. How many police officers do we need on the force so that each of the three shifts, morning, noon, and night, that will have people patrolling in the city, responding to crime? People don't see officers in their neighborhood. Do you have a number somewhere in there about how many more we should hire aggressively, or just get by with what we got?
No, we cannot continue to try to get by with what we got. We need more police officers. The overtime right now is out of control. Between about, I think, 2010 and 2020, MPD was averaging about 500 hours of overtime. That number has increased almost to 2 million, right?
Yes.
You're talking about paying 30 million on average during that period between 2010 and 2020. And now it's 4 times the amount that we're paying for overtime. It is out of control, and we need more officers to be able to address the extreme overtime, because that overtime affects morale and it affects overall policing in the District of Columbia. So we need more Metropolitan Police officers in the District of Columbia, and we need to do it in a way that's smart, that is attracting and recruiting competitively across our region.
I'm asking for a number. Every police chief since Charles Ramsey has said we need something close to 4,000, if not 4,000. The mayor, Browser, has said 4,000. Every person I've spoken to running for most any office won't say a number. If you want to lead the police department, give me a number.
No, I don't think you need to give you a magic number to lead the police department. I think we need to have the staffing levels required to reduce the amount of overtime and allow people to be able to...
What is that?
To be able to engage in quality community policing.
Is that 3,500 officers?
Well, I know that there's no direct correlation between having a lot more police officers and having safer communities. What I do know...
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about stopping overtime from 120 million a year to more like the 30 million, because you've got people to staff. You have 3 officers for 3 different time periods instead of one.
We agree, and what I've led with was that we need a lot more officers than we have today because the overtime is out of control. And it's not only a spending issue, it is a quality of policing issue. Look at the separation of officers that are happening. Their monthly reports is transparent now, it's published online. People are leaving the department not because they don't love policing, but because they're getting worn out. Right, they're getting asked to do all this overtime. And also the federal government is
offering more money. But again, that's why I pushed on the number.
But it also impacts. It also,
I'm 0 for 100. Not one political person I've interviewed in the last 2 years will say, "Well, I think a force of about 3,800 would be right because
that's what the mayor wanted. The mayor wanted to fund 3,800 police, and listen, they haven't been able to get to that.
Yeah, I've supported an increase in the police department because I know that we need to reduce overtime, but we also need to get amount and staffing up where people aren't asked to do their jobs in a way that wants them to quit something that they love. They're required to protect
That's why
and serve.
there should be a number. But okay, I asked that question.
But Tom, that requires an analysis to really understand what levels are. Though.
Kathy Patterson, the city auditor, did that analysis.
Well, Tom's saying they've already done the analysis, but I think between the lines, it's very difficult to hire.
Not one council member, not one mayor, nobody has said, well, I've actually looked. They call public safety. It's important. Let's move on to something else because you're not going to get that number.
I'm going to put in place policies that attract more officers to live in the
district. But how many more?
Yeah.
Well, I think the bottom line is very difficult to get the officers.
I'll give you a number my first 100 days.
If I were running for mayor or chairman of the council or at-large member, and I'd been a former judiciary chair like you, I'd have a number. But anyway, you're not alone. Everyone has avoided that question. They want to talk about public safety, but it's all kind of
I'm not avoiding that question, but it is not. But no, I don't think you have to have a magic number to get to the force that you need.
That's the answer. You don't think we know we have to have a number?
No, but we need to hire more officers.
In the budget.
We do have to move on now. Hard pivot though. Real talk. The criticism about you, council member, and maybe this is a style thing or whatever, but they want you to be out there more. For some reason, everyone's saying that. I don't know about everyone maybe, but a lot of people are saying that. Someone emailed us, a close observer, after you were not at a forum hosted about transportation issues. And someone, very sincere, like I think earnestly would want to hear from you, ask for their vote. They told us, they have heard from a number of people who are leaning McDuffie or McDuffie curious early on that they're disappointed he doesn't seem to be actually trying to win them over. And critics say...
By attending those events.
By attending more events, I guess. And this is a fake tabloid that journalist Michael Schaefer puts out. But
if it's fake, don't read it, Jeanette. If it's fake, don't read it.
You saw
don't
this?
Read it.
You saw
don't
this?
Read it if it's fake.
It's comedy.
You
can contribute to the fake news.
No.
Fake.
Well, he has a headline on a little tabloid thing he does that says low energy, which low energy is what he's saying, I guess. Okay. But what do you respond to? Listen, you've heard about it.
Here's the reality. I'm sure I've knocked on more doors than any other candidate in this race, period, full stop.
Okay.
Where's the last place you knocked on doors?
I was just in Ward 4 on yesterday, as a matter of fact. Knocking on doors.
Street?
A lot of support in that neighborhood, right? A lot of yard signs left in a place where they've never spoken to their council member, right? Literally, people said to me...
We're talking about Denise Lewis George again.
That's right. You know what they said? I had at least 4 people say to me, you got my vote because Adrian Fenty was the last person to knock on my door. 4 people.
You sat down with him recently.
I've knocked on thousands of doors across the city. And because it's not being published on social media, you got folks who are creating headlines. Then
what about these forums, though?
So here's the thing. Okay, let's talk about the forums. Who sponsored that forum that you're talking about?
Tom knows
4
the full
or 5,
list.
6
I don't remember right now.
There were like six groups that sponsored the transportation forum.
So
there's a brand new PAC, but there are several other established organizations that were part of it.
Right.
Greater Washington, I think, was one of them.
Did they already endorse in this race?
The Greater Washington?
Yeah.
I think that did they endorse?
You're saying they already endorsed your opponent, and then they held the forum?
Yes.
But there were other organizations.
I'm just saying. What I was doing yesterday...
Den. You need to go into the Lion's Den.
Listen, I grew up in the Lion's Den, by the way. I can show you where I grew up. I can show you where...
we heard that story. We heard that story.
I'm just saying. I know the Lion's Den.
Here's what happened. In 2014, Muriel Bowser was a council member, and she was running, and she was criticized, I think, then, for not going to some of the forums. And she said, well, these are all people who want to be in the campaign. I'm going to wait till they get on the ballot, then I'll know who my opponents are.
Let me tell you what our strategy is.
What's your strategy?
Okay.
We have built out a campaign calendar working from June 16th, 2026 backwards. It includes knocking thousands of doors across all 8 wards and attending a lot of events, including meet and greets of people who don't know me, right? We've had rooms from 15 to 20 to rooms as big as 80 to 100 of meet and greets. We've had fundraisers across the District of Columbia, right? Who's going to be on the ballot on June 16th? Tom, that's your question. Jeanette, who's going to be on the ballot on June 16th for a Democratic primary?
It's not going to be Tom or me, though.
No, well, it's not
You
going to be
can't
as
answer because we don't know yet.
many. So
You wanna
you
wait
agree
for
with kind of what the Bowser says. You got to wait to know who your candidate, your opponents are.
It
And then
makes
you'll
more
do more
sense.
forums.
We don't even know who the people are going to be on the ballot yet. Our
Okay, that's what
strategy is to go speak directly to voters across the District of Columbia, and we're touching more frequently at the events that we already have on the calendar. Right? I already have a calendar. My weekends are already made. They're already made. I've got events, both meet and greets, fundraisers, and canvassing that I'm not going to change that schedule because it's so important for us to talk to voters who don't make it to those events that you all are talking about. There are way more voters. There are way more voters outside those events than there are voters in those events. And this is not to disparage anybody who's spending the time to organize. We really appreciate that. But we've gotten tens of, I don't know how many requests for these candidate forms, guys. Like, you all should count the number and tweet about that.
I remember, yes, in 1998, there was like 100 forums.
That's what I'm saying. It's humanly impossible to do all those forums. But what we're going to do is meet voters where they are, knock on their doors, go to their community events. We're going to show up, where they're gathering around schools and other places. And that's been our strategy. This is not to disparage
Will
any
you do it? Once
forum.
you know what the ballot is, and you'll know who's going to get votes on June 16th.
Absolutely.
Then
yes.
Some of the larger
forums.
Yes,
the answer is yes. And there are about five. There are about five that we've already committed to, by the way.
Okay, you've addressed it. I think we can move on.
Okay.
Let's talk
by
about
the way,
Donald Trump.
Thank you for answering all our questions and staying long, by the way.
You bet.
Let's talk
about
Trump.
We can all agree, talk about Trump for a few minutes.
Let's talk about
Trump. Us into World War III. He has been insulting to the mayor of this city. He has attacked our city as a dirty, horrible place. All the things we don't have to repeat here. We know about that. If you're elected mayor, even if you get elected as the nominee to be mayor to election in November, how will you deal with President Trump? I asked Janice Lewis George this question. What would you do when President Trump sees a headline after Election Day, Democratic Socialist elected mayor of Washington, D.C. or what would you do if Kenyan McDuffie, Democrat elected mayor, where's Trump? Or you want to attack him on ICE, but you want to work with him to build downtown?
We're going to defend.
Where are you?
We're going to defend.
Who do you know in the White House?
We're going to defend every resident across the District of Columbia, particularly our most vulnerable residents, including our immigrant neighbors. Number one. Right?
Well, how does that? What do you mean?
We're going to end the cooperation between MPD and federal ICE and HSI and those agents. It doesn't have to happen.
I'm sorry,
but we have limited government. What if the Congress says you must work with ICE?
Wait, Tom, can I ask about this? What is the cooperation with ICE and MPD right now?
It is people riding together, showing up on the scene together. It is ICE officers shooting people in the District of Columbia. That's the cooperation that is going on today. That's the cooperation that's going to end on day one with McDuffie as mayor of Washington, D.C.
You can't stop ICE from shooting somebody.
Well, we can stop them from showing up with MPD, cooperating with them, and shooting people in the presence of the Metropolitan Police Department, and not riding with them, and not having people fill out reports that don't report on the actual shootings that occurred. We can stop that, and that's going to happen on day one, right? Again, I've done this as a civil rights attorney where we've been investigating departments and we've reformed them. You talked about Charles Ramsey a long time ago and what he did when he was chief. What you didn't talk about is that there was a Justice Department investigation that helped to bring about some of the changes that led us to being a top-notch law enforcement agency in the country. And I worked in that section where they were responsible for that MOU, right? I know how to do this.
Yes,
right?
They changed the way they handle mass demonstrations.
That's right. That's right. And what also happens is a focus on Washington, D.C. first, right? I'm not trying to run Washington, D.C. as if it's New York City, because it's not. We do not have 2 United States senators. We do not have a congressional delegation that votes. What we are is a product of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and we're going to make sure that we do something about this in a way that is smart, that allows us to deal with this administration on things that don't protect our neighbors, right? But we're going to also look at ways to partner like we did on RFK, 180 acres of opportunity that's going to be developed in total, almost $8 billion we're talking about of investment that's going to create thousands of jobs, thousands of units of housing, including affordable housing. hotels, amenities, good union jobs are going to be produced on that site. And I fought for that. I actually helped to negotiate that. Unlike somebody else who was a reluctant
You
yes
were
vote.
in the room
I was in the room.
with the chairman?
I was in the room with the chairman
Why
negotiating to
didn't
make
you
sure we
let
had
us in? I wish we were in there.
$800 million in revenue coming to the city, more opportunities for our certified business enterprises, more opportunities for residents who are looking for jobs in wards 7, 8, 5, and 6. This is what I helped to negotiate. I didn't just sit back on the sidelines and tweet about things. I actually was in the room to help negotiate it, and that's how I'm going to work to make sure that we build on Union Station. It's almost a $9 billion expansion if we can get it going.
Right.
To a
It
greater
could take
extent than it is right
13
now.
years too. Yeah. Your
We're going to
opponent
get it
talks
going.
about that too.
As mayor, I'm going to get it going. We've already had some, the types of conversations to work with the community of folks who are going to participate in that. All these federal buildings that are underutilized, 25% occupation, and we could have an opportunity there too. Forstall building, for example.
How
Right?
about the FBI
Labor
building?
Department, the FBI building, Tom.
Number
Finally.
one is the FBI building on Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's right.
What can, obviously that's federal property. They can do pretty much what they want with it, but what would you do with the FBI building when it moves out?
Oh, we wanted to have that building developed and put it on the tax rolls. We want some of those
It's going to
federal
be torn.
buildings,
It can't be saved. It's got to be torn down.
which is perfectly fine, and have somebody invest the capital necessary to get it to be a great mixed-use development, hopefully, that produces tax dollars that go to our bottom line at a time when we desperately need to grow our economy. We need to grow our economy from its base, and that means making it more attractive for people to do business and making it more attractive for people to want to live here and growing the jobs that are necessary to
Mr.
connect our
Councilmember, I agree
residents.
with the ambition and but when I won't think about that, I want to say, who do you know on Capitol Hill on the Republican side or the Democratic side?
Yeah,
so you can go
that's
up
a
and
good
say, look,
question.
make sure this happens.
Oh.
I understand the
Because,
ambition.
Can I just add on to that? There's a lot of overlap between what Janice Lewis George is saying too. She talks about she wants to make Union Station her RFK stadium, and she wants to redevelop downtown with the federal government help. You're saying a lot of the same things too. I think a lot of people can.
You want to know the
agree.
difference?
Well, the
You wanna know
difference, the strategy, and how. Yeah.
You want to know the difference? I've
Yes.
actually delivered on some of this stuff. I've already worked with people to try to invest in downtown, to grow downtown, to grow the jobs. I put $100 million into to stabilize our restaurant hospitality industry when we were suffering in the District of Columbia. The difference is one person's all talk, the other person has delivered for Washington, D.C. and has a record that you can look at. I have receipts, as they would say today. I got receipts, unlike my principal opponent. Tell her to show you her receipts next time she comes on your show. I ask for receipts. And let me tell you the difference too. I do know people on the Hill, on either side of the aisle, right? I've had conversations with some of these folks already. People like Senator Angela Alsobrooks, right? People like from my former boss, who's in Congress right now, like Glenn Ivey, right? I'm already talking to Aisha Braveboy
Well,
about how we do
that'll
regional.
be great if the Democrats take back the House in the November elections.
That's right.
That will make whoever's the next mayor a lot easier. If the Republicans keep the House by some possibility and the Senate, then we're in for several more years of President Trump doing what he wants.
That's right. But I have a demonstrated record of working across the aisle and across the border. When I chaired COG in 2018 and Metro was going through the capital challenges, similar to what they're facing on the operation side, I work with people across the aisle. I work with Glenn Lee. I work with our former CFO to be able to work with the chairman, right? Literally to come up with ways to address those capital challenges.
What would you say to President Trump? You know, he changed his mind. He's like a windmill.
I meant to say Jeff DeWitt, by the way.
I know you did.
The former CFO.
The president's a windmill. One moment he wants to attack the homeless people in this city. I must say there are far fewer people that I see in the city. He wants to clean up. He wants to do this. He wants to do that. He insults our mayor. He insults the citizens of this city. He insults our restaurant industry. He insults everybody. What would you say to this president? Back off?
I would say back off. I would stand up and fight back. And what I would say is Washington, D.C. is the best city in the world. And it's not because of the person who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's because of all the hard work that our civil servants throughout government and our locally elected officials, our ANCs and others have put in to make it the best city in the world. And as mayor, I'm going to continue to push back against any narrative that undermines what I know to be true. Right?
Nate likes to ask the question, future of the city.
Okay, well, yeah, let's talk. We will talk about the future of DC. But one of the things President Trump likes, though, is getting some kind of like gold gift whenever you visit the Oval Office, though. You might need to think about that.
Getting one of Jim Graham's old golden shovels he used to have in his office. And maybe he can save the Kennedy Center as
right now. He's not on my list to give gifts.
There
are other people in the District of Columbia who deserve opportunity, and I'm going to usher in opportunity with a great sense of urgency to those folks because they need it more than anybody else.
All right, let's wrap up with some future of DC questions. I know you mentioned Metro, actually. This is good. Metro is searching for dedicated future funding. Would you support something like that for Metro?
Maryland and Virginia have already taken the steps to do it.
Yes, is the easy answer. Yes, we absolutely have to. We need Metro in order to grow our economy. It is absolutely essential that Metro function and that it has the full funding that it needs from its compact jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia.
And
we need a better federal partner
right
too.
Now? Is it
we need a better federal partner?
Is it a regional sales tax, or how do you fund it?
That is a conversation that won't be made in a vacuum, but we need to fully fund it.
Each state, well, the people in Fairfax, Virginia didn't go with the sales tax. They've just added money to the budget. Maryland's doing the same thing, but there's no guaranteed level of revenue.
It needs to be guaranteed recurring funding. We've done the same thing in the past to support WMATA, and we'll continue to do that. But it needs recurring, permanent funding to be able to fully support it and allow it to continue to do what it does at a greater level for our region.
I think the general manager, Randy Clark, will quit if you don't get stable funding in the next 18 years.
Randy Clark and everybody at WMATA needs stable funding, and it needs to be done in the future for the future District of Columbia. Economic growth with guardrails. That means accessible, affordable transportation as well.
Speaking of transportation, there was a big project to build what they called expressway down K Street, heart of downtown. Initially, it was going to be streetcars and bike lanes, and a lot of the business community didn't want the bike lanes and the traffic problems that it would cause. The project is basically stalled under the Bowser administration. I believe the last proposal was to build bus lanes, a red carpet down K Street. Do you support a K Street expressway, or do you support finding another place downtown for that kind of big
I support a vision of economic growth with guardrails that protects our most vulnerable residents and shows them a pathway to the workforce. I support creating a pipeline of jobs at RFK and at Union Station.
Okay, I like that, but what about K Street? What about K Street?
Well, I mean, K Street can stand for some support in terms of transportation options, but nobody whose door I knocked on has asked about the K Street Expressway.
Okay. You're not. That's not a big one.
What about bike lanes? I know people all around. You said that I think Greater Washington, or somebody asked you guys in your candidate questionnaires, would you support taking away traffic lanes for vehicles to create more bike lanes and bus-only lanes? I believe your answer was yes on bus lanes. Well, just in general around.
Oh, in general? Oh, yeah. So in general.
No, you said bus lanes. I think you said you were more in favor of bus lanes. I think you said you would not want to take away travel lanes for more bike lanes.
Like Connecticut Avenue.
Specific circumstances.
So what I said, and what I'll say again here, and I think I led with it, is we need to be accessible in terms of all modes of transportation. A world-class city is a multimodal city, and I support all forms of transportation, including both bus lanes and bike lanes. What I don't support are thrusting those things onto communities without their input, right? We need to make sure that people who are who are mostly impacted by the things and the decisions that government makes are actually at the table when decisions are being made so that they can be informed before government acts. So I support bike lanes, I support bus lanes, right? I support the type of infrastructure that makes us a multimodal city. What I don't support are decisions being made at DDOT in some office on the
Office of Planning,
right? Or Office of Planning without the people who are impacted by these decisions, who are paying tax dollars that support these decisions. That's the problem that I have. And frankly, that's what communities have a problem with.
Every bike lane I've covered, there's been Office of Planning, there's been DDOT public hearings, all that.
Yeah, but guess what? People don't always, they don't always get, but they don't always even get the invitations to participate in that kind of stuff. You know as well as I do, Tom, that just because a civic leader gets an invitation or an ANC gets an invitation doesn't mean the person who's working a double shift actually got the invitation or has the energy to go to that meeting. How do you reach those folks? Is that you show up for them and you do it in non-traditional ways, right? You go to the Little League games, you go to the community center where somebody is swimming, you meet these people where they are and you inform them about what government intends to do. Use the people's resources for the people's priorities.
One of the buzziest topics last time was Waymo and robo-taxis. You actually wrote the bill to legalize robo-taxis. Are you all in on robo-taxis in DC?
I'm all in on innovation. I'm all in.
Your opponent, Janice Lewis George, has raised a big question about whether to go forward with Waymo. She says she's waiting for the DDOT study, but she's worried about job losses.
Well, it's because, well, you know how that is, right? It's because she's parroting what unions are telling her to say. I went to the unions and I talked to them about it, and I gave them examples about how California has done things differently. I'm blanking on the name of the country, the company, but there's a way where you can have a conversation about technology and innovation, even when it comes to AV and Waymo, that brings organized labor to the table with business. You don't have to have an either or. Leadership requires people to make tough decisions. I've actually done that in my career, and RFK is the latest example. Other people would rather just say yes to whatever they're being asked to do, even if they don't have the resources to fund it. We need to lean into innovation in a way that we haven't in this city before, not to displace workers. I have family who are government workers, right? We're not trying to displace workers. We're trying to free those workers up to do the job we need them to do and make processing more efficient. I think innovation when it comes to AV is one of the things we certainly should explore as a city.
Do you think DC is ready yet? Do you think DC is ready this year?
Well, I'm not mayor this year. We're going to be ready when I'm mayor. How about that? I was sworn in on January 2nd, 2027.
When is the Department of Transportation going to release? Isn't the study like
the problem with the study
old?
is the council passed a bill saying the study should have been out within, I believe, a year, and it should have been out by 2024. It got pushed to 2025. They said they would have it out in the fall of last year. They didn't. Now it's pushed to the spring. You know, I don't really know when that's
Maybe they need some technology at DDOT to speed up their processes.
But what about AI? Maybe they need AI. But one other question.
Maybe they need AI to speed up their processes. I know these studies have been taking a long time. Maybe when, I'll leave that.
I know we're out of time.
Do you personally use AI, by the way? AI.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I do. Yeah.
It might be
I use it. I want to be familiar with all types of technology. So I have personally used AI, and I don't think people should be afraid of it. I think they should understand it, including our students, and displaced workers should understand AI as well.
Okay, I used AI to look up your background about Stronghold, but let me ask you I gotta get this again.
It's the best neighborhood in Washington, D.C.
Is it a political issue for you in your campaign opposite Janice Lewis George, the fact that she is a Democratic Socialist of America member, where they think capitalism has failed? Is that an issue for you in your campaign? She says, I don't agree with everything the Democratic Socialists do, but she does represent their ideas in many ways. She's a member. Is that an issue for you in the campaign?
I think it is actually one of several issues for her. It is not an issue for me.
You will not be bringing it up.
She decided to join the Democratic Socialists of America Party. And she also decided to make a lot of empty promises about free childcare and other things that she won't be able to deliver on. One, because she won't win as mayor, but also because if you look at New York City, a lot of the promises that were made on the campaign trail are not being delivered on right now, right? Because the minute you become the person who runs the city, you have an obligation to those residents. You get smacked in the face with the economic realities of actually governing. And I know the difference between campaign rhetoric and actual experience to govern. What I'm saying is,
Donnie did win in New York. He did win with those campaign promises.
And what's the first thing? What's the first thing he did on his freeze the rent promise? He went to the state and
asked for $1.5 billion.
That's right. And we don't have Albany. We don't have Albany in Washington.
You became an independent to run for the council at large, but you're a Democrat. And so you don't think you're going to bring up the Democratic Socialist part, which some business community people are worried about.
No, the business community people are free to bring it up, just like you just brought it up. I think voters are going to bring it up. I've talked to voters who looked at her questionnaire that she filled out for the local DSA, and they are appalled by some of the answers that she provided. And so I will leave that to Janice Lewis-George to defend her own record or absence thereof.
Okay.
Speaking of management, if elected, you'll be the CEO of a $21 billion entity. What kind of boss are you? What's your management style?
I am a great boss. I am
That's
a
what all
boss who
bosses
leads
say.
by going out and getting the best and the brightest talent to make sure that they make this city the best city in the world. And what it takes is really looking locally for talent, but also scouring the country for some of the best and the brightest to be able to run these agencies, recognizing that we need to grow
And
our
your
economy.
campaign.
That's right. And we need to grow our economy in a way that has guardrails so we're protecting people from displacement.
Oh,
right?
wait a second. So, Tom almost made. I'm sorry.
And then
Go
I got to
ahead.
go.
Finish.
Apparently, I'm being told that I had a 3 o'clock.
We gotta go.
We're going to end.
Yeah.
Hyde Act.
Yes.
Tom made me forget, but what do you think of the Hyde Act? Should it be relaxed, removed?
I think it should be relaxed in certain parts of the city,
but not downtown.
I think there's certain parts of the city that need to grow. I think we need to maintain our unique character as the one and only nation's capital. You don't want to ruin the views of the monument, the Capitol.
We don't want to be Roslyn.
Or we certainly don't want to be Roslyn.
Or
we want
New
to
York
be
City,
the
apparently.
one and only Washington, D.C. We certainly don't want to be New York City. And we don't want to have somebody who is trying to be the mayor of New York City running for a D.C. office.
Okay. Well, one last question. I asked your opponent this. How do you stay true to yourself in politics? You've been in politics for a while. It's a world where everyone is asking you for favors. You're going to be a kind of a celebrity. You're going to be at cocktail events in the evening. People are going to come up to you. You're going to be facing constituents in the morning. It's an arena of theatrics, but also real responsibility. How do you stay true to yourself? How do you preserve your integrity as a politician? How do you do all that?
Well, I stay true to myself because I never got into this for self-aggrandizement. I never got into this because originally I wanted to be mayor. I got into this because it's my passion and it's my purpose. And this work is personal to me, right? I stay grounded because I still live in the place where I grew up. When I walk out of this door, it's my obligation to fight for the people. It's my obligation to fight for this city and the people who need opportunity the most, right? And so I'm never going to forget where I came from, always understanding that the minute that I'm no longer a council member, I'm no longer mayor, I'll just be Kenyan McDuffie. And my obligation is to my faith, my family, and my community. That's never going to change.
Councilmember, thank you so much for joining the Dream City podcast. You stayed very long. We appreciate you answering our questions, spending time with us. Thank you.
Yeah, some of your supporters want to see that passion on the campaign trail, not just in living rooms.
Listen, I've been the kind of person who hasn't chased cameras and microphones. You all know it well. And I'm running for a higher office. I'm the person who's been down the Wilson building for 13 and a half years, focusing on getting shit done. That's what I've done for the last 13 and a half years.
Okay.
Don't leave just yet. I'm going to read us out. Dream City Podcast is sponsored by Spotlight DC, the Capital City Fund for Investigative Journalism. They raise funds and award grants for award-winning, impactful local journalism. Go to spotlightdc.org to donate and view their grant-funded projects. DC is Dream City. Have a good week, everyone.